Hi Simon, how are you?
All right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Very good. Everything good with the pup?
Yeah, she's my mum's got her at the moment,
Yeah,
so yeah, having a little break. It's difficult. It's hard
yeah.
work, to be honest, but she's good and she's starting to have a bit more time on her own, which is really nice.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
And
yeah. How are
everything
you?
good with the flat and everything, yeah?
Yeah, the flat's fine. Yeah, it's good. Settling in and just so busy with work, man.
Yeah.
So busy. Yeah, crazy. I'm in an art fair this weekend in London, so I've been getting work ready for that. And then the same gallery taking me to another art fair in London in March. So I've got to get 5 or 6 large paintings ready for that. I'm in a
Okay.
still life exhibition in March. Haven't even started them. Been taken on by another gallery here in Norfolk, so working on the project for them. Plus teaching. I mean, it's absolutely
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah. So kind of lucky to have you for a little bit of time here. And
Yeah, I've probably got about 45 minutes, if that's all right.
well, if it's okay with you, I've already pressed record. So you
Yeah,
came into a recorded meeting because I just
absolutely.
thought every second is precious at the moment. So I'd
Yeah,
like to just kind of get going and
yeah.
get started with it because busy life, but we always kind of talk about stuff which is relevant anyway. So I
Yeah,
thought if we just start the meeting the way that
yeah,
we do with kind of catch ups
yeah.
and because I thought the bonus show that number one was quite a nice. It worked quite
Absolutely.
well. I quite.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are we doing now? We're doing a bonus.
I think it's good to get a bonus showdown if it's okay with you because
Yeah,
otherwise I think it's going to get tricky the later we leave it because it's a longer meeting and it takes a bit of you know
absolutely. Yeah,
'cause I also thought that there's certain things that we talked about last time which I'd like to discuss a bit more in detail this time if possible. You touched upon the Matisse book, and I thought that that's something which you know a lot about, and it'd be nice
yeah,
to have that kind of you kind of talk at length a bit about that and me just because I haven't read it. I was hoping to read it so I could discuss it with you, but at the same time I know that you said that you can talk at length about it anyway, so I didn't know if that's
yeah,
something which you'd be willing to share a little bit about because it seems relevant to what you're doing as well at the moment, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, it's a very, very, very long book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic. And Hilary Sperling
And the book, what's the book called as well?
is called Matisse: The Life, and yeah, I mean, it's a great book, and I think Matisse is one of those artists that everybody knows, obviously, and he we kind of, I think when we think of Matisse, really, especially maybe a British audience, is we think of the what's called the snail or his later cutouts, which is actually it's in the Tate Modern, I believe, or it has been at points. Um, but Matisse, to get to that place of those final cutouts, I mean, he went on a huge journey, and I mean, he was absolutely obsessed with his work and with painting, and he he came from the north of France and was in a place which was full of textiles. It's famous for textile manufacturing. So he was sort of introduced to and um, absorbed in these textiles, these weaves, all of this stuff for his early life. But, as many artists know, being a painter was not something that was conceivable, especially for his father. And that caused a lot of tension. But he sort of become determined to do it. And his journey is just, it is this almost kaleidoscope of different influences and experimentations with working, of breaking molds, of absorbing things, and going against the grain, knowing the trends, what was going on at the time, but also going against the grain and really forging his own path forward. But also, and I mentioned it last time, rebelling against his own styles or any ruts that he may get into. And a lot of that was him just pushing forward and looking for new ways, but also him going against acceptance in many ways, so craving acceptance for his work to some extent, but then kind of rejecting it as well. And a lot of that was just on aesthetic grounds. That he it wasn't that he didn't want to be popular, but he wanted to keep pushing forward with his work, and that is so admirable, because it is for many artists it would be a recipe for career disaster, but for him he just kept pushing through to the point of poverty, and he had a family and to support and stuff like that. So just when he was getting doing well and bringing some money in, he'd tear it all up and sort of go again. I think stylistically, and what artists can learn from someone like Matisse in that sense, there are a few things. So one is the work ethic. I mean, this guy was very, very disciplined, to the point of authoritarian with himself, but also with those around him as well. The models he worked with, his children, he had very high standards of what it meant to be, in the creative sense, work-wise. There was no slouching at all. There's a painting by Matisse of his, it's called The Piano Lesson, and his son actually recalls where this come from. His son, Matisse, would make his son get up at sort of 5 a.m. to just practice the thing at the piano, and would stay in the room next door, upstairs, I can't remember, but any time he sort of hit a bum notes, you'd hear his dad sort of hitting on the floor or the wall. I mean, it was almost too much authoritarian in that sense, but they were the standards by which he held himself, that discipline of work. And that's why, he, despite his illness later on in his life, in his immobility, he just kept going and evolving and adapting his work to it. So the cutouts that he's known for, and amongst other things, are as a result of infirmity and not being able to do what he used to be able to do. And so that is the kind of the work ethic aspect of Henri Matisse that is, I think, when we think of artists, those who have, quote unquote, become or made it or become great artists, they've pretty much got one thing in common, and that is absolute determination. And I mean, Turner is a similar example in that sense. Why do we remember Turner? Yes, his work was great, but he too was just on it all of the time. When he wasn't painting, he was networking. He was, applying the kind of the business side of it, and what an artist would do nowadays. Trying to work with galleries, trying to maybe get commissions, having a good social media account, having a newsletter, all of those things. I mean, Turner was very much like that. Matisse, not so much in the marketing aspect as discussed before, because he would sort of go against what may bring him much more success in the now to push forward towards that. Turner was known as being a bit of a grumpy character, but very sociably gregarious and charming, and especially in his middle years. But Matisse was known as a bore and but his work is just full of this colour and light. So to look at these great artists is just so important for painters nowadays. And there are many artists that we don't have their books on our shelves. We're not reading biographies about. Now, some of that is to do with the talent. Some of it is to do with just time and place. But a lot of it is to do with that golden element, which is absolute determination to make their stamp on art history, not with the purpose of doing that, but just an obsession with it. And I think, and I see this a lot nowadays, people talking about that only sort of privileged people can be artists, and a lot of these artists came from privilege. They didn't. They came from mostly sort of working lower middle class families, and in the case of Matisse, was sort of alienated from his family because that's not what people do to make a living, to become an artist. So again, it's another good reason for reading and learning about these artists. I think when it comes to the artwork with Henri Matisse, I mean, there's just so many different styles and so many different journeys and influences, and that he was sort of, around the time when the Impressionists were aging. So obviously there was that Impressionistic influence. And then he became one of the Faubes in The Wild Beast. So he was part of them, but then kind of moved on. And then, I can't remember the chronological aspects of this, but then sort of become, in a way, not a cubist, but become a great sort of rival to Picasso. And they were sort of doing these parallel paths and constantly sort of riffing off each other in that sense. But Matisse also was just very interested in this kind of sort of exotic way of presenting things where colour and light and the simplicity of form, and especially some of the motifs from North Africa and Morocco, Algeria, how that could sort of work within modern painting and have that influence. And he'd come from this sort of quite grey and gloomy north and started to get these influences of light. And it's interesting that sometimes it takes coming from a greyer place to desire that warmth. So he starts bringing in motifs again from fabrics and tapestries and all of that. So it's similar to what he'd seen when he was younger. And of course, it's that experimentation, always with style and always pushing forward and not getting stuck in ruts. And we talked a lot about this last time as well, that, as artists, and I'm very guilty of this, is to get kind of caught within the repetition of a general theme with variations. And that is good and it's effective, and especially within the contemporary context. But Matisse gives us an example of how to tear things up and keep that creativity alive. He's a great artist and well worth. The book is well worth reading, and Matisse is well worth looking at in more depth. A couple of examples. Art history, it talks to art history. So, like Turner is sort of talking in many ways to earlier contemporaries. He then is in conversation with the Impressionists in a visual sense, that the Impressionists are going back and sort of looking at Turner's way of perceiving things. And then, Monet is then in many ways in conversation with a lot of the abstract expressionists visually. Matisse does something similar with abstract expressionism. There's a painting, I think it's called The Red Studio, I can't remember, but where he's playing with the picture, he's creating this flat perspective space. Another thing about these great artists is that they're in conversation with art history, but not only art history, in many ways, like with Matisse, all forms of creativity, tapestry, fabrics, all of that kind of stuff.
It sounds amazing, and it's got some great values to take from it, such as discipline and the ability to reinvent yourself, which is really brave and risky, but it's something which should really be valued and held up as a very admirable quality in anyone who's trying to seek, another creative path for themselves. And in your work, I absolutely love your still life work, so I'm excited to see more of that from you, because it is just like your skyscapes and seascapes are just exploding with, just this beautiful ability that you have to describe things, and it is just amazing work. So I'm excited to see that come from you. It's great stuff. But there's also the kind of, I don't know, bordering on kind of cautionary things with Matisse, with the kind of obsessive quality which people have, and I feel it in myself, where it's all encompassing. It's from morning till night. It's the first thing I do when I wake up, and the last thing I do before I sleep is to do with the work, and it's it's a labor of love, but it's also, it just, every facet of your life becomes engrossed with this obsession and this kind of need.
And again, I think, with Matisse, that is overspilling, into his other relationships in many ways. What he expects of other people is to match that energy, and it is a high bar to meet. And I think as well, with this, I recently wrote an article, or done an interview. I didn't write the article, for Canvas Rebel magazine, and talking about resilience and things like that. And I found that there really is a fine line with sort of creativity and how you apply it, and how that relates into mental health, and things like addiction and habit forming. And in many ways, being an artist, it's similar to an addiction or an obsession. It really really creates its own fuel in a way to do that. And I think one's got to be mindful of it, because there are then other aspects of life that can suffer because of that, including your health, but also including the work. But is it a good thing to be absolutely obsessed 24/7? At points, yeah, I think it is. But I've found now, because I've got other things to keep me kind of engaged, whether it's a gallery or teaching, or now looking after the puppy, that it's kind of stopping me from being able to paint all day, every day, and become absolutely obsessed. So I've put in these kind of restraints to my own sort of decadence in that way, and own propensity to become completely isolated within that creative process, and then thus sort of isolating myself further from both society and empathy or compassion towards other people. That I've had those moments where I'm just a work machine, a paint machine, and I just think, well, why isn't everybody else like this? So you see that Matisse thing, it's singular vision, and I believe there's a lot of inspiration and a lot of things to learn from life that exists just outside of, or to the side of, or close to a painting practice.
I think there is this myth that, much like with comedians, that you need to be inherently kind of mentally unwell in order to be a successful artist, and that can be apparent, as you've mentioned, with the pressures and the comparison and the kind of drive that we all will experience when trying to improve and trying to ensure that we are being true to our own wants and motivations. But I think it's worth evaluating the state of mind of artists that we admire from the past, and picking the healthier aspects, and
absolutely,
setting aside things which are more destructive to your own well-being, because it's too easily done, really. So it's a slippery slope, and it's certainly something which is worth being mindful of, I would think. And I try to myself, because it's personally, my niece has just moved over to the UK from America, and she's setting up here and getting her UK passport, and trying to set up a life here. And so I took her and her friend out for a day, and took her around to several places. But then I had to introduce her to certain galleries and show her certain things, because I thought this is relevant to introducing her to facets of my life and where I'm going to be when I am busy, and if she wants to catch up when I have things that are happening, because a lot of the time it will be related to the gallery, and if not the one which I work with, then other galleries that I'll be visiting, and just a weekly practice, really, of visiting places to see what art is happening, to network with people, and to keep yourself outside of the studio periodically, so that you're not just feeling this stuffy environment of your own conditions, really. So that is something I try to make sure I do. I've been traveling with Spinner Park, and I went to go and see one of our recent guests, well, one of our previous guests, I should say, Pete Monahan, which was nice to see him in the studio, which is really interesting. I mean, it was a bit of a calamitous journey for me and Ralph on the road. It was there'd been some issues with the flooding recently, and North Wales relies on a lot of little roads to drive on, so we had to take a huge detour. We went to see two artists, actually, which was nice. Beth Fletcher and Pete Monahan, and they're both in different locations, so we had to travel quite far in one day. It was a long day, but it was an amazing experience, as always, to go and visit artists in their own spaces and talk to them. And they both cover landscape in quite a nice, loose and expressive way, and they have their own they kind of what feeds their passion for those subjects is unique to them, obviously, but it's interesting to hear it from them. So with Pete, he has a background in technical drawing, and he showed us some of his technical drawings that became paintings that he would watercolor paint, but it would be on a very technically drawn piece, so whether it's a bicycle or a car or whatever it is, and then he'd have this looser paint splashing on the top and movement created there. With Beth Fletcher, she's driven more by climate change is a concern of hers. So she does really nice loose landscape. One thing I noticed with her work that I really appreciated and talked to Ralph about when we were on the road is that all of her landscapes in her house and in her studio space, I looked at all of them and not one of them had a blue sky, which I thought was lovely because it wasn't gloomy either. She had pinks, she had yellows, she had lots of movement, and it was all very interesting and beautiful. None of it was really oppressive like
Griffin Williams.
Yeah, Cuffin Williams. Not like that kind of oppressive grays.
Yeah.
Um, but she had this kind of, I don't know, I should have asked her about it, but this impulse to not include blue in the sky, even though we do have blue skies in Wales. We've had lots of them recently, but it was lovely, and it did speak to the landscape and the experience, and I'm sure the memory of a lot of people. But then, yeah, for both of them, because for Pete, it was interesting to see how his work is just, it's just an amazing patchwork of textures that he's, just so many layers, 4 or 5 layers of paintings and things stuck onto the surface. And it's such an abstract question of what something's doing, because it's not, it's wondering whether it's asking something or whether it's doing something visually that the other one doesn't do, or it's difficult to pinpoint what artwork needs to do, but you need to find that in yourself, don't you, really?
It doesn't need to do anything in that sense. I think within certain niches or even certain time periods, it could be it's challenging me on my perception of the identity of trees, for example, or that type of thing. But sometimes it can just hit an aesthetic note that works. It's that thing. It's like you think of a song, don't say, well, what is it? What is it trying to say? What is it? It's just like, I just like the sound of it. I don't even understand the lyrics. It just works.
I agree. It's a really subjective journey with things like that. So,
definitely, and it can be on lots of different levels. And I listen now to a lot of contemporary classical music. Just it chills the dog out. I like painting to it, but then. Equally, I've been listening to Elevator to Hell this morning. Do you know them? They're
don't know that, no.
Yeah, very interesting sort of alternative indie band from the 90s. It's kind of got feelings of a little bit of Velvet Underground, bit of Sonic Youth in there, that kind of stuff. And then I'll switch over to listen to the Smiths or something. It's all different. It speaks in different ways, to me. It's not saying anything inherently. It's just the artist. I'm writing something else again for somewhere, and say the question is, what would you like people to know when they first come across your artworks? And I said, it may be a cliche to say, but I would like the paintings to speak for themselves, that the viewer is able to be in communion with the work on their own terms. Art is highly subjective, and a work will mean different things to different people, anywhere from indifference, bemusement, or absolute connection. Ultimately, when I paint, I'm painting for myself in order to get as close to an alignment of how I experience things and how I'm able to express them. And that's as simple as that. And I think in many ways, it's at the heart of a lot of art. It is just about the artist trying to make a good work of art.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. Well, it's been great catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining me again for the bonus show. And good luck with all the jobs you've got coming up. I look forward to seeing updates on it.
Yeah, thanks so much. And see you soon.
Yeah, cheers.